Welcome to the Select Star Podcast, your resource for innovative technology, developer topics, and more. Here's your host, Margo McCabe from the HarperDB team.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the Select Star Podcast, which is hosted by HarperDB. We have another awesome guest today. So today we have Graham Haythornthwaite, who is the Vice President of Engineering at Wonde. I'm excited to speak with you, Graham. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me on. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, and where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Nottingham in England, United Kingdom.
Okay. So it's the end of your day then.
It is, yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time. I know today we're going to be talking about a couple different topics, and one of them being leading an engineering team, one being the 4-day work week. But before we jump into all of that, would love to just hear kind of an intro on you, your background, journey in tech.
Yeah, sure. So, my journey in tech started at a very young age. I think I was about 5 years old when my dad came home with a computer. It was a Commodore VIC-20, which probably ages me quite a bit. But there weren't that many games around. And I think my dad realized that for the same price as buying a game, you could buy a book which had programs in that you typed in yourself. So he would buy quite a few of those books, and I'd sit typing those programs in. And I was hooked from kind of that moment, and I perhaps developed some of my debugging skills at that stage, because if you typed it in wrong, those games wouldn't run. So you had to fix it yourself, and I learned a lot through that sort of early stages.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I think a few years on from that, once I realised there was a career in software development, that was my focus. So right through school and university, I kind of knew that was what I wanted to do. So yeah, I got a computer science degree, met my now wife at university. And when we finished, we said whoever gets a job first, that's where we're going to live. And she was from Nottingham and got a job in Nottingham, and we've been here ever since.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And so did you from early on with getting your CS degree, did you know like where you wanted to focus your efforts moving forward? I know a lot of people that I've had on the podcast kind of talk about that struggle of like when you're first learning to code and learning computer science, there's so many different directions that you can go between like DevOps, front end, back end, all of that. Did you sort of know from the beginning what you wanted to get into?
I think I just knew I wanted to be writing software, working with computers, and I think I had the motivation to find a job in Nottingham. I think I was really fortunate in the role that I got. Was a very small company. We were doing sort of outsourced software development for other companies, and having been there a few years, they then switched to develop their own product. So it was a far more sort of startup kind of environment. I think there was 8 of us there when we first started. We tried a few unsuccessful products, but then really hit the big time with a very successful product, and I stayed there for a long time as a software developer writing core parts. But then as the teams grew, I had that transition through to a management and more leadership position within that company. So I guess answering your question, did I know? Not really. I think I knew where I wanted to start, and then just kept my eyes open to opportunities as they presented themselves, and sort of kept thinking about, what do I enjoy doing? What do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? And I think that's how my career developed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's definitely one of the benefits of being on a smaller team or at a smaller, as you said, startup style company, because you can probably much more easily get experience in all those different areas and kind of figure out, where the best fit is and build your skill set, as opposed to being maybe a little more pigeonholed into one specific area.
Yeah, definitely. There was, I did all sorts of things in that role. Some more enjoyable than others, but it was a great learning experience. And
Yeah.
And
That's
I
how
think
it
even
goes.
now, when I've got sort of other people to help me in those roles, I can relate to those roles and appreciate the value that they bring, and that I don't have to do everything myself anymore. I've got other people who can help with that.
Right. That's awesome. And so, so what about the company you're at now? What is it that they do? And then what specifically is your role?
Yeah, so Wand sort of really helps schools manage the transfer of data from their own school systems, all about the children and the teachers and the classes, and the applications that the schools want to use. And we sit in the middle of that. We provide a nice simple cloud API for the applications to use, so they can integrate with us once, and then get all those different sort of back end connections to the different schools. And the schools know that we're looking after their data, it's secured, and it's safely shared with the apps that they want, and only the data they want to share is shared. So that's really where we sit in that middle space there.
Okay, interesting. So you're still, you said as a sort of smaller company or
I mean, I think relatively,
yeah.
we're sort of 150 people now, which is
Okay.
quite small compared to some, but is a lot bigger than those 10 people places as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, exactly. So are there any big sort of name competitors in the space that are doing the same thing you're doing, or do you feel like what you guys are working on was sort of filling this gap because there wasn't a need, especially, with the focus on the schools?
Yeah, I think there's a few different companies about sort of trying to do bits of this. I think some of our origin story of Wand was we were trying to use a different solution. We were trying to be an app integrating with the school and using somebody else's sort of connector, and it wasn't very reliable. It wasn't that easy to use, and I think our founders said, well, we could build something ourselves to do this, and then what if we've got this problem, then other people might have this problem, and that's sort of where the idea came from.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. And then so you said that you're basically leading the engineering team, so you probably are overseeing a lot of different projects and initiatives.
Yeah, and I think Wand has grown very successfully across England. We've got maybe 25,000 schools, pretty much every school on our platform. And we've now started branching out to Australia. We've got a growing number of schools and districts starting to use our solution there, and a little bit now in South Africa. So it's interesting to see the different stages. If you talk to a school or an application in the UK, they will say, yeah, we know Wand, we're probably using Wand, we're very well known and established. It's a very different story in those different territories around the world. So that's quite interesting, and keeps us thinking about what we need to be doing and what service we need to offer, and how our product needs to move and develop to work in those different regions.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes to specifically leading a team, is there anything that you like about that? If there's people listening that want to get into a management role, or people are always looking for sort of like tips and tricks. Like, is there anything that helps you when it comes to managing a team, specifically, in the engineering world?
Yeah, I think I've always been very focused on um, helping people. Servant leadership is a big thing, and I think having done the role of software engineering, I know what I would have liked as a manager, and I try and be that person for my team, and remember that it's those people who are writing the software, or building the products, and that's ultimately what our customers are paying for. It's not the management as such. So it's remembering where does the value come from, and how can I help make that as smooth and as enjoyable as possible. I think that's sort of what drives me, and what I would like people to remember, because that's the sort of manager I would have liked in those roles as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the age old the golden rule of like trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes and do unto others as you want them to do for you. And it really stands true, especially in management roles of, we weren't born into these roles. And so just remember what it's like when the roles are reversed. And that's probably a really helpful way to kind of guide you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, so I know you also wanted to talk a little bit about shifting to the 4-day work week, which is really interesting. I don't think I've spoken with anyone yet that has officially implemented that. And I know a lot of companies that have like the half day Fridays and things like that, but I'm curious, what prompted your organization to shift to the 4-day work week initially, and what's been the turnout of that?
Yeah, I think there's two things that perhaps prompted it. We'd all been through a global pandemic, and everyone had got forced to work from home. And I think there was a lot of questions about the future of work, what's important in daily lives. And I think the founders at Wonde have always been very entrepreneurial. They're open to try things and want to experiment. So I think that sort of planted a seed, and the opportunity was there. The ideas were floating around, and I think the other part of it was recognizing that we had a great platform, a great product at Wonde, but we wanted to try and get to a next level. And that probably meant scaling the business and the engineering team in particular. So we were looking at, how do we stand out? What makes us different? How do we grow? How do we retain people as well? Make sure that for every 2 people we hire, we're not losing one, because that makes the job twice as hard to get to a suitable scale. So I think those 2 angles of really thinking about work-life balance and how we're going to attract and retain the best people. So I think that's where the genesis of the idea came from. And we started with a 6-month trial. So we didn't commit to it completely, but we did say to everyone in the business, right, we're gonna try this for 6 months. There's almost that onus then on people to say, if you like this, make it work. So there
Right.
was a real sort of excitement about the place, at trying to make it work and figure out what the challenges were.
So do you find
And I
that
think,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think in those first month or 2, I think it was a bit disorientating. I think people kept stumbling across, I was going to have a conversation with this person, and I need a meeting with that person, and I'm not sure which days are going to work. So there's a little bit of that chaotic start, I guess, of people figuring out what new work patterns were needed, what touch points now worked between different people and different teams. But after that first month, things really settled down. And we really got into a nice rhythm and a flow, and those connections were established and strengthened. And it's been really good for us since then, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think I could see this having the effect of people being more careful and efficient with the time that they have.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like when someone's about to go on vacation, you feel like they're kind of ramping up and all of a sudden able to do a lot more with the hours that they have in the day. As long as it doesn't have, as long as you don't see that reverse effect of then people feeling like they have to be working longer hours or something. And, it's probably interesting to see the way that all kind of balances and plays out.
Yeah, I think one of the first questions most people will ask when they say, well, when they hear I'm working a 4-day week, well, what does that mean? Is that longer hours? Do you start earlier? How do you fit it all in? And we do generally work 4 days. We've reduced our hours, no reduction in pay, and we really do focus on that. How can we make the most of our time? Let's work out what the most important things are to do, and then let's not do the rest. Let's not do that just hanging around at the end of the day until it's time to go home, because we've got no energy left. Let's be on it all the time.
Right. And is it the same day off company? Like, is it Fridays off company wide, or do you split it up so that there's coverage on every day of the week?
Yeah, we split it up. It was down to managers to kind of allocate where the days would sit for their team.
Okay,
I've been very open with the individuals and always have a conversation with them about which days would work best for them. We provide a 5 day a week service, so we need to have enough coverage. And I think that's generally been the conversation I've had within engineering teams of if you all have the same day off, that maximizes collaboration and time together, but also leaves you exposed if you've got external commitments.
right.
If the support team needs you, who are they going to contact? You know, how do you balance that sort of need to maximize your collaboration time with your external commitments?
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. So it sounds like once you've worked out the initial kinks and kind of the trial, it sounds like it's certainly something that has more pros and cons, at least from your perspective, and that the general attitude from the teams and from the employees is that they prefer it this way. Would you say that's the overarching theme?
Yeah, definitely. We've been through our trial. We've said it's been a success. We now we've implemented it completely into our teams. And I think when I talk to other technology leaders, the theme for the past year or so has been about how hard it has been to recruit good people, and that sort of lack of talent. Or on the flip side, the quiet quitting kind of people drifting away and not being engaged. I think the 4 day weeks really kept people engaged and enjoying working with us, and it's been fantastic for attracting new people to the company. I think when when people see our job adverts or someone reaches out and said, "Do you want to talk to us about a role that we think you'd be good for?" And by the way, we work 4 days a week. Most people will say, "Yeah, sure. Tell me your story. Let me hear."
Yeah.
Um, and then it's down to the rest of the story to really get them over the line. We've got a great product doing wonderful things for schools. We've got a good team. All those things then come in and gets people over the line. But I think the 4 day week opens the door.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. It makes sense. It almost seems like, years ago when work from home first started becoming popular, like that was sort of the bonus was like, hey, we have flexible work from home versus come to the office. And now I think that that's almost a requirement. I don't think maybe many companies have a lot of success if they say you're required to be in the office these exact hours, Monday through Friday. Because it's sort of, I think it creates that same excitement of like, okay, if I can break up the week and do 2 days in the middle of the week at home and get some other stuff done at the same time, then when people come back in, they're kind of, recharged. And then the 4 day work week is almost like a continued expansion of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think particularly within engineering teams, the ability to work remotely is almost a standard now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's become a requirement. And
Hmm.
like for us, we have great offices for the people that are in the Denver area. That's totally optional to come in. And a lot of times it's the people on like the business sales side. And then pretty much all of our engineers are remote and they enjoy having the option to come, or come visit in town since some live like across the states. But yeah, I can't imagine, especially as you said, for recruiting top talent. I can't imagine that being something that would draw people in to say, well, we require this amount of hours in the office. So that's interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see where the 4 day work week goes, because I'm starting to see like more companies talk about it and asking about it. There's definitely some trendsetters in the space, so I think it'll be interesting to see over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm hopeful that more and more companies will try this and find how successful it is, and it becomes a new standard. I think I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Awesome. And so, yeah, I know, well, we talked a little bit about, we already touched on, sort of leading a team in general. I think that you mentioned that your dev team had recently doubled in size.
Mm.
Um, is there anything like that you would recommend to help ensure success when scaling a dev team, and specifically if it's in like a short period of time? Like I know some companies struggle with kind of keeping the culture fit and getting everyone up to speed and things like that. So have you seen anything that's been really successful specifically when it comes to scaling?
Yeah, I think you're right. We've gone from about 25 to 50 engineers within the team. So yeah, doubled in size. I think a phrase I've heard and I really like is sort of nail it before you scale it. I think it's really important that we had a good foundation to start with. So we already had a great cloud-based modern technology platform with some pretty good processes around how to deliver software. We all had that experience and knew how to get things out the door. So things were running quite smoothly already, which means adding new people, they sort of pick up on those good habits, and it's then far easier to scale. I think if you've got lumps and bumps in your process, if you've got large bottlenecks, adding more people and not addressing those bottlenecks is not going to be effective. I think way back in the 70s when Fred Brooks was managing the IBM teams, he said that adding people to a late project makes it later. And I
Right.
think that's so true. You can just add more and more people asking more and more questions, and slow the people down who know what they're doing, having to answer those questions. So you can make things worse if you're scaling a sort of poorly performing team.
Right. Yeah, and I think that probably applies to any, I think it probably applies to any team in any vertical, not just in the dev team, where, as you said, make sure you have everything ironed out and you have your goals and your processes and as much of that nitty-gritty in place, even if it's a pain. Because yeah, like being in the startup space, sometimes you don't have to be as diligent with like, what are the processes that you're going through? What are the things that you're doing each day? And oh, what's the company do when this comes in and all of that. But if you're going to scale that, as you said, those are going to be the first questions that people ask. And it's better to just have that documented, have that figured out, have the team agreeing on it so that it's just a really seamless sort of training process. Cause I can imagine trying to go back and retrace your steps. It's just not fun for anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other really important thing probably for any engineering team, regardless of whether you're scaling or whether you work 5 days or 4 days, is to really look at the flow of work. I think for a long time we've been quite focused on being busy and how busy is each person. But really we want to look at the flow from idea to solution, and where does work get stuck through that flow, and those kind of bottlenecks and kinks in the process, that's where you can add a lot of value and optimize the team. So I think that constant look at cycle times and flow is probably the kind of the key area to look at from an engineering team, regardless of size, regardless of scale, and regardless of 4 days or 5 days a week.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes sense. Those are all good tips. And I'm sure anyone listening is probably just nodding their head saying, you're speaking their language. So it makes sense. So one other thing that I like to ask folks is, if there's any technologies or anything that you're excited about, whether it's related to your work or not, like whether it's related to a side project or just through, what you're keeping up to date with. Obviously, there's constantly new technologies and frameworks and so many things coming into play. And so I always love to ask people, like, what are you keeping an eye on over the next month or 6 months or year? Or is anything that's exciting you that you want to try out? Anything that's going to make your team's life easier, along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think perhaps the cliched answer you've probably heard a few times is the AI movement and where that's going. I think I'm kind of keeping a curious eye on it. I don't know whether I'm overly excited or underwhelmed at the moment. I think, but it's there. It's not going anywhere. I think it is going to have a big impact on lots of things that we do. We perhaps don't realise what the various different applications of that technology will be. And then if I pick perhaps something closer to home, for our lives at Wonde, and perhaps through my journey. So I'd always been more of a C#.NET kind of technology stack, and before that C++, largely on a Microsoft Windows platform. Wonde is the first time that I've been working with PHP as a technology, and I think PHP perhaps has a bit of a bad reputation at times. It can be not seen as the greatest language, but actually I've been hugely impressed. It's come on massive since I first came across it many years ago. It's got a great framework. We use Laravel, which is a fantastic MVC framework, and the things that I can see my team being able to do very quickly, get great web apps out with all the right unit testing, automated tests, a nicely laid out code, very maintainable, great delivery platform. I'm very excited about sort of working in that technology space, and perhaps seeing where that develops as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I certainly agree with your first point too. You know, a lot of people do mention the AI being something they're excited about, but I think everyone has their own reasons and curiosities and maybe hesitancies around what it's going to be. And so I think it's fair to acknowledge that and kind of keep that in view, since more and more people and companies are trying to get into the space. It's really interesting what already there is the capability for, and then what it's actually being used for, as you said, like what real use cases are actually making a difference in. And so it's certainly something everyone's thinking about. So
Yeah.
there's no harm in bringing that up, but yeah, I know we're kind of coming up on time here, and that was most of the questions I had. I really enjoyed this conversation, and it's always great to connect and learn about different companies out there, especially, you know, anything that's related to the data space. Obviously, that's kind of speaking our language, and so I always love learning about what different companies are doing, and yeah, was fascinated to speak to someone that has the official 4-day work week. So I appreciate you sharing all of that.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Well, I will be sure to include a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes in case anyone listening wants to get in touch. Is there anywhere else where you'll be, Graham, coming up, like any conferences or anything, or do you have any blogs, or kind of just keeping it low key at the moment?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the best place to find out anything that I'm up to.
Okay.
Yeah, so connect on there. That'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Select Star, your resource for innovative technology and developer topics. You can find our episodes in all the usual places: Spotify, Apple, Google, RSS, and YouTube. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and share. You can learn more about HarperDB at harperdb.io.